Monza, September 10th, 1961. Phil Hill crossed the finish line and became world champion. The mechanics erupted. Champagne sprayed, flags waved, cameras flashed. Someone asked, "Where's Ferrari?" Nobody knew. They found him 2 hours later, sitting alone in his office in Maranello, 40 kilometers away, door locked. He hadn't watched the race, hadn't heard the celebration, hadn't congratulated his champion. Because on the same day Phil Hill won the championship, Wolfgang von Trips died on the track. 14 spectators died with him, and Enzo Ferrari understood something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Every victory he achieved was built on the possibility of this moment. This is the story of the day Ferrari won everything and celebrated nothing. The 1961 season had been Ferrari's most dominant in years. Phil Hill and Wolfgang von Trips, both driving for Ferrari, had been fighting for the championship all season. Back and forth, victory after victory. By September it came down to Monza, the Italian Grand Prix. Home race, winner takes the championship. Von Trips led the championship by 4 points. Hill was second. Both drove red Ferraris. Both were extraordinary talents. The Italian press called it the perfect rivalry. Two teammates, equal cars, pure skill deciding the outcome. Ferrari said little publicly, but privately he told his engineers, "I don't care which one wins. Just make sure it's a Ferrari." That was Ferrari's philosophy. The car mattered more than the driver. The badge mattered more than the name. Drivers came and went. The prancing horse was eternal. But something else was happening that season. Something Ferrari felt but couldn't articulate. The cars were getting faster. Much faster. Technology was advancing. Engines produced more power. Aerodynamics became more aggressive. Speeds increased every year. But safety hadn't kept pace. Barriers were still primitive. Hay bales and wooden fences. Runoff areas were minimal. Medical response was slow. Drivers died regularly. Not occasionally. Regularly. In 1961 alone, 5 drivers had died in racing incidents before Monza. Ferrari attended none of the funerals. Not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much. Every funeral was a reminder. The cars he built, the beauty and speed and precision, carried within them the capacity for this. So he stopped going, sent flowers, made donations, but didn't attend. His secretary, Maria, asked him once, "Don't you want to pay respects?" "I pay respects," Ferrari said, "by building safer cars. But the families, Ferrari interrupted quietly, "deserve better than my presence. What comfort would I bring? I'm the man who built the car that killed their son." Maria didn't ask again. Race day, September 10th, Monza circuit, 60,000 spectators. The atmosphere was electric. Championship on the line. 2 Ferraris. Italian crowd. Ferrari wasn't in the paddock. This was unusual but not unprecedented. He rarely attended races, preferred to stay in Maranello, listening to radio updates, monitoring telemetry from the factory. But everyone assumed he'd come to Monza. Home race, championship deciding moment, Italian pride at stake. Phil Hill asked about it that morning. "Is the old man coming?" Hill asked Romolo Tavoni, Ferrari's team manager. "No," Tavoni said. "Why not?" Tavoni shrugged. "You know how he is." Hill did know. Ferrari was superstitious, unpredictable. Sometimes his absence was strategic. Sometimes it was just Ferrari being Ferrari. Hill didn't think much of it. Wolfgang von Trips was more troubled. "He should be here," von Trips said to Hill, before the race. "This is important. He trusts us," Hill said. "That's why he's not here." Von Trips smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Or he doesn't want to watch what might happen." Hill didn't know what that meant. Von Trips didn't explain. The race started at 2:30 p.m. Von Trips qualified on pole. Hill started second. Both got clean starts. The first lap was chaos. Monza's first chicane, the Curva Grande, was fast and tight. 30 cars compressed into a narrow section, wheel to wheel, no room for error. Von Trips went into the chicane leading, Hill right behind. Then Jim Clark's Lotus, starting further back, tried to squeeze through a gap that was closing. Nobody knows exactly what happened next. Some said Von Trips moved slightly right. Others said Clark came left. Others said it was just racing 2 cars in the same space at the wrong millisecond. What everyone agrees on, the cars touched. Von Trips' Ferrari pitched left, hard, climbed onto Clark's wheel, launched into the air. The car flew into the catch fencing, the crowd section, where spectators stood 3 deep behind flimsy wire barriers. The Ferrari hit the fence at 225 kilometers per hour. Von Trips was thrown from the car, killed instantly. The car disintegrated into the crowd. 14 spectators died, dozens more injured. The race didn't stop. Nobody knew the full extent immediately. Crashes happened. Races continued. That was normal. Phil Hill, directly behind, saw it happen, saw Von Trips' car launch, saw it disappear into the fence. He had a choice, stop or keep racing. He kept racing, not because he didn't care, but because stopping wouldn't change what had happened. And if he stopped, Von Tripp's crash might be for nothing. Someone else would win. Ferrari would lose. Hill drove the remaining laps in a fog, mechanical, numb. He won the race, became world champion, crossed the line and felt nothing. In Maranello, Ferrari was in his office. He had a radio. Could have listened to the race. He turned it off. This wasn't superstition. This was something else. Years later, Ferrari would say, "I stopped listening to races after too many silences. The silence when the commentator stops talking. When you hear the pause. When you know something has gone wrong. I couldn't bear that silence anymore." So he worked instead, reviewed engineering reports, signed documents, waited for the phone call that would tell him the outcome. The call came at 4:45 p.m. Romolo Tavoni, voice tight. "We won the championship," Tavoni said. Ferrari waited. There was more. You could hear it. "Wolfgang is dead," Tavoni said. The car went into the crowd. Spectators too. "We don't have a count yet." Ferrari was silent for a long time. "Phil," he finally asked. "He's fine. He won. He's the champion. Does he know about Wolfgang?" "Yes." "How is he?" "He's not celebrating." "Good," Ferrari said. "Tell him to come home. Tomorrow. Not today. The press wants." "No press," Ferrari said. "Tell Phil to leave. Now. Before they make him take photographs." Tavoni understood. "I'll tell him." Ferrari hung up, sat at his desk, looked at the engineering reports he'd been reviewing. They were performance analyses, speed improvements, aerodynamic enhancements, all the things that made the cars faster, all the things that made moments like this possible. He put the reports in a drawer, locked it. Then he sat in the dark and waited for something he couldn't name. At Monza, chaos, medical teams overwhelmed, spectators screaming, press swarming, police investigating. Phil Hill stood on the podium alone, no teammates beside him, no celebration around him. Someone handed him a champagne bottle. He held it, didn't open it. Photographers yelled, "Smile, you're world champion." Hill couldn't smile. A journalist pushed forward. "Phil, how does it feel to win?" Hill looked at him for a long time. "It doesn't feel like winning," Hill said, "but you're world champion." "Wolfgang is dead," Hill said flatly. 14 people are dead. I didn't win anything. I just survived." The journalist kept asking questions. Hill walked away, found Tavoni. "I want to leave," Hill said. "The press. I don't care about the press. I want to leave. Now." Tavoni nodded. Ferrari said the same thing. He said, "Come home tomorrow." "I'm not going home," Hill said. "I'm going to a hotel. Alone. I'll come to Maranello when I'm ready." "When will that be?" "I don't know," Hill said. Hill stayed in a hotel near Monza for 3 days. Didn't speak to anyone. Didn't read newspapers. Didn't answer the phone. On the 4th day, he drove to Maranello. Arrived at the factory at dawn. Empty. Quiet. He sat in his car for 20 minutes, trying to decide if he wanted to go in. Finally, he walked to the entrance. Maria, Ferrari's secretary, was already there. "He's expecting you," she said. "How did he know I'd come today?" "He didn't. He's been expecting you every day since Monza." Hill walked to Ferrari's office. Door open. Ferrari at his desk, reading. He looked up, saw Hill, said nothing. Hill stood in the doorway. "I'm the world champion," Hill said. "I thought you'd want to see me." Ferrari nodded slowly. "Come in. Sit." Hill sat. Long silence. Then Ferrari said, "Are you here for congratulations?" "No," Hill said. "Good, because I don't have any." Hill looked at him. "You're not happy we won?" "We didn't win," Ferrari said. "We traded Wolfgang's life for a championship. 14 spectators' lives for a trophy. That's not winning. That's accounting." Hill's jaw tightened. "I didn't kill Wolfgang." "No," Ferrari agreed. "The car did. The speed did. The ambition did. We all did." "Then why do we race?" Hill asked, voice rising. "If every victory is paid for like this, why do we do it?" Ferrari didn't answer immediately. Finally, "Because we can't not do it. Because stopping would mean Wolfgang died for nothing. Because the only way to honor him is to learn from this and build something safer, better. But that takes time. And in the meantime we race. And sometimes we pay." Hill looked away. "I can't celebrate this championship." "Neither can I," Ferrari said. "Then what do? We acknowledge what it cost. We remember Wolfgang. We remember the spectators. And then we decide, do we quit, or do we continue?" "What did you decide?" Hill asked. Ferrari looked at him steadily. "I decided I can't quit. Racing is what I am. Without it I'm nothing. But I also decided I'll never celebrate a victory the same way again. Because every time we win, I'll remember this day." Hill stood. "I'm going back to America for a while." "When will you return?" "I don't know. Maybe never." Ferrari nodded. "If you return, there's a seat for you. If you don't, I understand." Hill walked to the door. Stopped. "Did you watch the race?" Hill asked. "No," Ferrari said. "Why not?" "Because I knew something like this might happen. And I couldn't bear to hear it. But you knew I won. You knew about Wolfgang." "Yes. And you didn't call me. Didn't congratulate me. Didn't come to Monza." "No. Why?"
Ferrari looked at Hill for a long moment, because congratulations would have been obscene, coming to Monza would have been a lie, pretending this was a victory would have dishonored Wolfgang. So I stayed here, alone, and felt exactly what you felt on that podium, that we'd won nothing, and lost everything that mattered. Hill's eyes filled. He didn't cry, just nodded. Thank you, Hill said quietly. For what? For not pretending. Ferrari didn't respond. Hill left. He returned to America. Didn't race for Ferrari again until 1962. When he did return, he and Ferrari never spoke about Monza again. But something had changed between them. Hill said later, after Monza, I understood Ferrari differently. Before that day I thought he was cold, unfeeling. But in that office when he told me he couldn't celebrate, I realized he felt everything. He just couldn't show it, because showing it would mean admitting that racing might not be worth what it costs. And he'd built his entire life on the premise that it was. The mechanics at Ferrari noticed the change immediately. No celebrations after races, not even victories. When Ferrari won races in late 1961, and throughout 1962, the routine was the same. Cars returned, mechanics checked them, drivers went home. No champagne, no photographs, no parties. Someone new to the team asked why. We don't celebrate anymore, Tommaso, the head mechanic said. Why not? Because the old man decided victories aren't worth celebrating if they come at the cost they sometimes do. But we won. Isn't that the point? Tommaso shook his head. Winning used to be the point. Now the point is building cars good enough that winning doesn't require someone dying. The new mechanic didn't understand, but the older ones did. They'd been at Monza. They'd seen the crash. They'd watched Ferrari withdraw into himself afterwards. They understood. The man who'd built an empire on speed and beauty had realized that beauty could kill, and he'd never forgiven himself for loving it anyway. In 1963, a journalist interviewed Ferrari about the 1961 championship. You won the Constructors' Championship and the Drivers' Championship that year, the journalist said. One of your greatest seasons. How do you remember it? Ferrari was quiet for a long time. I remember, he said finally, that we lost more than we won. But Phil Hill is alive, Ferrari interrupted. Wolfgang von Trips is not. 14 spectators are not. When you ask me how I remember 1961, that's what I remember. Not the trophy. The cost. Do you regret racing? Every day, Ferrari said. And I'll keep racing every day until I die. That's the contradiction I live with. How do you live with that contradiction? Poorly, Ferrari said. But honestly, the interview was published, caused controversy. Some thought Ferrari was being morbid. Others thought he was being honest. Phil Hill read it in America. He called Ferrari. First time they'd spoken in months. I read your interview, Hill said. And, Ferrari asked, you said you regret racing every day. I do. But you keep doing it. Yes. Why? Ferrari thought about it. Because regret means you understand the cost. And understanding the cost means you might, eventually figure out how to lower it. If I quit, I'd stop trying to make it safer. And then Wolfgang died for nothing. That's a hard way to live, Hill said. Yes, Ferrari agreed. But it's the only way I know how to honor him. Hill was quiet for a moment. I'm coming back to race next season. Why? Same reason as you. Because quitting means it was all for nothing. Ferrari didn't respond. But Hill heard something in the silence. Relief, maybe, or understanding. I won't celebrate if we win, Hill said. Neither will I, Ferrari said. But we'll keep racing. Yes, that's insane, Hill said. I know, Ferrari said. See you next season. The years passed. Ferrari won more championships, more races, built faster cars, better technology, and never celebrated a victory again. Not in the way others did. No champagne showers, no wild parties, no public exultation. When Ferrari cars won, Ferrari himself would nod, say good, then return to work. The mechanics and drivers learned not to expect more. Some found it cold. Others understood it was the opposite. It was feeling so much that he couldn't express it without acknowledging what victories cost. In 1966, a young driver asked Ferrari why he never came to podiums. Because, Ferrari said, if I celebrated every time we won, I'd have to mourn every time someone died. And there isn't enough time in a life for that much mourning. But celebrating isn't mourning. The driver said. No, Ferrari agreed. But celebrating means forgetting. And I can't forget. Not Monza. Not any of them. Does that make you sad? Ferrari thought about it. No, it makes me responsible. There's a difference. In 1982, another tragedy. Gilles Villeneuve, one of Ferrari's most beloved drivers, killed in qualifying at Zolder. The team was devastated. Villeneuve had been electric, charismatic, the kind of driver who made racing look like art. Ferrari was in Maranello when the call came. He hung up the phone, sat in silence. His engineers expected him to close the factory, cancel the race, mourn publicly. Instead, Ferrari walked to the garage. Keep working, he said, but Gilles would want the car ready for the next race. Ferrari said, so make it ready. The team worked, but quietly. No music, no conversation, just work. That evening, one engineer found Ferrari alone in the garage, sitting beside the car Villeneuve had driven. Are you all right? The engineer asked. No, Ferrari said, but I've never been all right after these moments. You don't get used to it, you just get better at continuing. Do you ever wish you'd chosen a different life? Ferrari looked at the car. The beautiful, deadly machine. The thing he'd spent his life perfecting. Every time this happens, Ferrari said quietly. But then I remember. I didn't choose this life because it was safe. I chose it because it was the only thing I ever loved enough to be terrible at. Terrible. The engineer said. You've won everything. Have I? Ferrari asked. I've won races, championships, trophies, but I've lost drivers, friends, parts of myself. Is that winning? The engineer didn't know what to say. That's the question I've been asking myself since Monza 1961, Ferrari continued, and I still don't have an answer, but I keep racing anyway, not because I've figured it out, but because stopping would mean admitting I never will. Ferrari died in 1988. His last years were spent mostly alone. The factory continued. The cars kept winning, but Ferrari himself withdrew. He rarely gave interviews, rarely appeared in public, spent his time in Maranello, in the office where he'd received the phone call about Monza, about Villeneuve, about all the others. Before he died, a journalist asked him, "What's your proudest achievement?" Ferrari thought for a long time. The championships, the journalist prompted. The victories. No, Ferrari said. Then what? That I never lied about what it cost, Ferrari said. I never pretended winning was pure. I never celebrated as if the victories were free. I carried the weight of every loss alongside every trophy, and I never asked anyone to pretend otherwise. Is that an achievement? It's the only honest one I have, Ferrari said. He died 3 months later. At the funeral, Phil Hill spoke. Enzo Ferrari, Hill said, was the only man I ever met who understood that you can love something and hate what it costs at the same time. He never resolved that contradiction. He just lived with it, honestly, painfully, and that honesty was more valuable than any championship. The funeral was massive. Thousands attended, but it wasn't a celebration. It was a reckoning, because everyone who knew Ferrari understood. His life wasn't a triumph. It was a negotiation with tragedy, and he'd spent 50 years negotiating, never winning, never losing, just continuing. After the funeral, someone found a letter in Ferrari's desk, unsealed, undated. It read, "Every victory is a debt. Every championship is a question. Every trophy is a reminder. I built beautiful things that killed beautiful people. I can't undo that. I can only acknowledge it and keep building. Not because I've earned the right, but because stopping would mean they died for a lie. So I continue. Not in celebration, but in penance. This is my life. This is my sentence. This is my love." The letter was never published. The family kept it private. But years later, Phil Hill mentioned it in an interview. "Did you ever read it?" The journalist asked. "No," Hill said. "But I didn't need to. I knew what it said. Because I felt the same thing on that podium in 1961. That moment when you realize, winning and losing aren't opposites. Sometimes they're the same thing. And learning to live with that is what separates people who race from people who understand racing." Did Ferrari understand racing? Better than anyone, Hill said. That's why he never celebrated. The conference room at Monza where the 1961 podium celebration happened still exists. There's a small plaque now, commemorating Wolfgang von Trips and the spectators who died. Tourists visit, take pictures, read about the tragedy. Some ask, why did they keep racing after this? The answer is complicated, but if you understand Ferrari, the answer is simple, because stopping would have meant it was all for nothing. Racing continued, safety improved, slowly, gradually. Barriers got stronger, medical response got faster, tracks got safer, not fast enough, never fast enough, but faster than if everyone had quit. Ferrari's refusal to celebrate wasn't despair, it was responsibility. He understood, if you love something dangerous, you owe it honesty. You don't pretend it's safe, you don't pretend victories are free, you acknowledge the cost, you carry the weight, and you keep working to lower the price. That was Ferrari's gift, not the cars, not the championships, the honesty, the refusal to celebrate as if winning erased what it cost. In 2011, 50 years after Monza 1961, Ferrari held a memorial. Phil Hill was still alive, 93 years old, frail but present. Someone asked him, "Do you ever think about that day?" "Every day," Hill said. "Do you regret winning?" "No," Hill said, "but I regret what it took to win. There's a difference." What would you say to Ferrari now, if you could? Hill thought about it. "I'd say, thank you for not lying. Thank you for understanding that some victories aren't worth celebrating. Thank you for teaching me that love and regret can live in the same heart. And thank you for never asking me to forget Wolfgang." Hill died in 2008. At his funeral, someone played a recording from 1961, the podium at Monza, the moment Phil Hill became world champion. You can hear the crowd cheering, the cameras clicking, the champagne bottle being handed to Hill. And then, very quietly, almost inaudible, you can hear Phil Hill say, "Wolfgang should be here." Nobody responded. The celebration continued, but Hill said it, on tape, forever, because he learned from Ferrari. You can win and mourn at the same time. You can hold a trophy and feel its weight. You can stand on a podium and refuse to smile. That's not weakness, that's truth. And Ferrari taught him, truth is the only thing worth celebrating, even when, especially when it means not celebrating at all. Have you ever achieved something that cost more than it was worth? Have you ever won something and felt like you lost?